Okay, so welcome to part two. Unfortunately, this did get cut off in the middle of the economic policy. So if you are a little confused, go back to the first video and watch the last part of it to get that first part of the economic policy. But now we're going to go into the second part of the economic policy with Colbert, right? So under Colbert, economic prosperity occurred. His policies did pretty well for the government of France, right? He encouraged new industry and commerce, and he enabled companies to be tax exempt for the first few years they were in business. So that encouraged more business to occur, which then allowed them to create more jobs and then more, obviously economic prosperity for them to happen. Infrastructure, any politician in the US and in the world will always say they want to put money into infrastructure, and you see that Colbert was the same way. He put money into roads, canals, and ships. Why? Well, because trade. You need good roads, you need good canals and good ships to move trade back and forth between France and between different countries within Europe. He also did something really important, and he eliminated local tariffs, right? So what does that mean? So in France, each little province was putting tariffs on the other provinces within France. And so he said, yeah, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to get rid of those the inside tariffs, but we're going to increase the tariffs on imports. So anything coming from outside of France, we're going to increase tariffs on, right? So that people then buy French-made goods, right? And so French-made, it doesn't matter what province it's coming from, it'll be cheaper than any outside imported good. He also did something very important as well. He promoted the growth of the colonies. He saw that as a big, important step in creating an empire and creating more money, and you see them start to grow within the Americas. So now we go into foreign policy, right? So Louis XIV reigned for 52 years. Unfortunately, 30 of those years he was at war. Right? So, yeah, it wasn't the best time in France. So the question becomes, why? Why would he be at war for 30 years? Well, he wanted to create a natural frontier, right? That's important to Louis XIV, and it's important to his economic advisors, a natural frontier. He also wanted to grow French power, right? He wanted to grow French power, but other countries feared the strength and power of France. So that created issues, which then created war. France wanted to grow in influence, and other countries were like, I'm not feeling that. We don't want France to dominate Europe. That's not going to happen. And then lastly, he wanted to unite French armies, right? So it wasn't just about creating the reorganization of the armies, but he needed them to be united because he needed them to fight for him. And the only way you could better your armies is with war. So what are the impacts? Well, the balance of power in Europe started to change just as much as the balance of power within France started to change. The king was taking all the power, all the decision-making, all of that. And within Europe, France became a pretty important power. And that leads to the second, right? The French influence. French started to have a really big influence throughout Europe, right? And we're going to talk about the Palace of Versailles and what that meant. But unfortunately, the last impact was really detrimental in its debt. France got into a massive amount of debt because of its wars, because of its excess spending for Louis XIV, but also because of the amount of money it took for their colonies overseas and to build the Palace of Versailles and the wars and to keep up that military of 400,000 soldiers who need uniforms and need officers. It was expensive and it became a problem. Debt is always the most deadliest thing. So finally, we go into culture and society. Right? And of course, we have to talk about the Palace of Versailles. So Palace of Versailles, what was it? It was the center of culture, style, fashion, and art. A place where plays, poems, and operas were housed, right? This became the hub for France of culture, right? It was the palace, the city of culture. But what became apparent socially is that the rich got richer and the poor got poor. Versailles was out of touch with reality, right? They were so far away from the slums of Paris, so far away from the issues around France, and they were in their own little bubble, right? And Louis XIV was living a high life, spending a lot of money, and he really didn't get to see what the outcomes of his policies were on the rest of the people of France and the rest of Europe. So that's very important to understand. Right, and that's important to understand because these policies set in place will lead to issues right around the corner that we learn about not too deep down into the lessons about the French Revolution and the issues of the poor and them feeling neglected. Guys, I just want you to know that this is on PowerPoint, so you could see all the cool little animations and transitions. Unfortunately, in class, we had to convert this to Google Slides, so they don't get as many cool transitions as you do. But of course, this is the Palace of Versailles. Just look at this. It's beautiful. Look at all the gold, right? Look at the manufactured gardens in the top right. It's perfect. Nothing out of touch. You can imagine how many people were needed to ensure that this was perfect. Look at the Hall of Mirrors in the bottom right. All gold, right? This is saying to the world, look how powerful, look how rich, look how divine I am. All you have to do is look at my palace. It's huge, it's beautiful, it's perfect. And as we continue on, look at the marble in the left, right? Top left. Beautiful. The furniture, right? The bottom left, there's a ton of huge fountains. And I think that bottom right really shows you how manufactured it was. It was literally down to the T of perfection, right? And then as we go into this next slide to the left, we do have the chapel, right? Religion is very important, so they have a huge chapel in the Palace of Versailles. And the other two photos show you that furniture again. I want to point out gold is so important, right? Gold is coming from the Americas, but it is the symbol of wealth and prosperity and strength for these monarchs. And King Louis was going to have as much gold in this place as possible. All right, so now before we get to the Kahoot, I think it's a good idea for you to go into the next document and for you to read A Day in the Life of King Louis XIV and do those questions. That'll be in your folder. So do that. And then when you're done, it's a good idea to do this Kahoot. You could play it by yourself. It's a good review for you to figure out what you should review throughout this PowerPoint and go back to. So if you want, I'll link the Kahoot on the side so you could get to it. Again, I think that's important for you to review as this is a self-paced type of lesson. Okay, and then to finish, I want you all to answer this question. Determine whether the reign of Louis XIV was positive or negative for France, right? And you're going to go to your Google Classroom and you're going to answer this in a one-paragraph answer. Right? I want you to remember, I'll put a rubric up, even though it's just kind of determining what I want to see. But the main idea, right, for this paragraph is that you have a main idea, you have supporting evidence to back up that main idea, and that you use historical significance, right? So a paragraph 5 to 7 sentences, those 3 things must be in there. Right, that's what I'm going to be looking for. And we might go over this the next day, or I might just comment real quickly on those paragraphs for you. But that's important to do. If we weren't able to finish this in class, they did it for homework, so you have the time to do it. So again, one paragraph, and just be as straightforward and simple as possible, right? What's the main idea? What are you arguing? What supports that argument? And then what is the outcome of that, right, for the historical significance? And that's it. So this is the end of the lesson. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or your teacher, and we could get back to you as soon as we can. And so that's it. This is the end of part 1 and 2, and I hope you all enjoyed.